If you're calling for gun control after the Wisconsin Christian school shooting, but you were silent about gun control after the United Healthcare CEO assassination, you are as dishonest as you are disingenuous. The show starts now. So, yesterday, a juvenile, a 15-year-old girl, reportedly gunned down students at Abundant Life Christian School, and the Madison Police Chief, Sean Barnes, for some reason, was not readily willing to disclose much, and this feels very familiar.
We know that 3 people are dead, including the suspect shooter. We know that the suspect shooter was a teenage student who attended the school. At this time, we're not releasing the age or gender of the student or any other identifying remarks about the student. 2 other people have died. That died were a teacher and a teenage student. 6 other people were injured. 2 students are now in critical condition in the hospital, and these injuries are considered life-threatening injuries.
Absolutely tragic, no doubt. But using the last decade as a historical precedent, it's hard not to feel pretty skeptical of all of it, because it feels like if the shooter was a straight white male, we probably would have known that detail pretty fast. But either way, the rush to make this about guns started immediately. It's important to note that the suspect used a handgun and was a juvenile. In case some of our Democrat friends aren't familiar, the only law that would have prevented this would have been gun confiscation, which we all know is not constitutional or feasible. Also important to note that individuals who shoot up schools tend not to follow laws. Just thought I'd point that out. But you know what could have prevented this tragedy? Maybe something really basic like a metal detector or a school resource officer.
I'm not aware that the school had metal detectors, nor should schools have metal detectors. It's a school, it's a safe space. So I don't know. Again, it is a private Christian school. It is not under the authority of MMSDs, and that is something that we'll have to look into. It's not my knowledge that they had a school resource officer, that if they did, it would be a police officer, and I know where they all are, and they're not in the schools right now.
All right, so if I need to go through a metal detector to attend a Christmas Trans-Siberian Orchestra concert at Bridgestone Arena, is it really crazy that students would have to go through a metal detector to enter a school? Because, gun confiscation is unconstitutional, but walking through metal detectors is not, and it does not infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens whatsoever. Look, in a fantasy fairyland, we'd hope schools wouldn't need to be protected and fortified, but this is the real world, so perhaps, just perhaps, it's time. Joining me now to debate and discuss this and much, much more is former senior advisor to none other than Hillary Clinton, Philippe Reines. Philippe, it's great to have you. I want to debate and discuss this latest tragic school shooting. Just briefly, I want to get your top-line thoughts on it and then move on to other news of the day. But I got to get your take from the left on the horrible tragedy that happened yesterday at that school.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think on this, I'm probably more to the center than the left. And I, knowing that we would talk about this, wanted to pull this out. This is my DC firearm registration card. I'm a gun owner. I believe in people's right to own guns. I most certainly don't believe anyone should be taking anyone's guns. And I don't think that that's what the Democratic Party stands for, as much as that we're branded that way. That said, it can't be a free-for-all. I mean, this is a horrible, horrible, horrible event. I think we all agree on that. That's not a partisan issue. I do think there are circumstances, you just said, over the last 10 years, there have been events where there have been a problem, in the sense that, I remember when I first started doing Fox News, it was right around the time, it was right before of the Las Vegas shooting, which I think remains the worst shooting in American history. And that man, who we never learned why he did what he did not commit a crime until he pulled the trigger. He bought that AR-15 variant legally. He transported it, I believe, legally. Same thing with Parkland. I believe the same thing with Uvalde. And there's a problem there, because then if we all agree that someone should not be able to shoot up schools and concerts and kill dozens of people, then there has to be something in between having no laws and having an absolute, revocation of the Second Amendment. And there has to be some kind of, common sense here, and that there's no slippery slope here. If someone were to say, you know what, let's outlaw ghost guns, that's not to say, okay, next we're coming for your hunting rifle. No one's coming for your hunting rifle. They're just not. And I think that as long as we see this, or the political debate is in this stark terms of let you have any gun you want or let you have nothing but a BB gun, we're not going to get anywhere. And, it's horrible to watch this happen. It's horrible. I have to admit, I didn't know this happened during the day yesterday until late at night. I'm thinking that's how inured we've become to these happening, is when they're just not. I mean, I think this has happened almost once a day this year. And that's what's working. What's happening is not working. And that means we do need smarter gun control. I have no problem with someone putting metal detectors outside schools. I do think school resource officers are questioned because, Uvalde is a good example of just someone having a gun doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing to have there. People who want to arm teachers, I think that's a whole other problem, because do you want them to teach, or you want them to be a dead shot? That's where I think it gets strange.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who can be educated in both teaching and also educated in firearms.
Sure.
I don't think that that's out of the question. I don't think anybody wants to arm teachers who are not properly trained or licensed to handle that kind of situation. I don't think many people are saying that that's the best idea. However, having a school resource officer, having, an armed security presence in schools, I don't think is outside of the bounds whatsoever, given the fact that if I go to a concert, there's armed security. If you go on the red carpet to a Hollywood event, there's armed security. So the fact that maybe there should be armed security in schools, I don't think is outside of the question. But speaking of gun laws and gun control, in this particular incident, this was a juvenile, a 15-year-old girl. It's already a gun-free zone. So what laws would have prevented this individual from getting that gun and doing what she did? Because from my understanding, everything that she did was illegal to begin with.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I have to admit, I don't know enough of the facts in the case, but I think there's always a question of where it was purchased. Was this purchased by her parents? Was this her parents' gun that she took, that she stole, that she knew they had in the house? I really don't know, but there's always some point where the gun belongs to one person and then it ends up in the shooter's hands, that you really have to figure out what happened in that moment. Was it a legal sale? Was it a gun show sale? It's just too easy to buy a gun these days. In Washington, D.C., our capital, I had to get this permit, I had to take a test, which I'm not going to pretend was particularly hard. But I did go through a waiting period of background checks, fingerprint checks. And then once it was cleared, the police department let me come and get my weapon. I don't know what happens in Wisconsin, but I do know something went wrong for a 15-year-old to end up with it. It's very possible that the parents did something legal, but really very stupid. And you can't criminalize every bad parental act. But again, I just don't think we can just throw our hands up in the air and say, there's nothing to do about this, which is what we tend to do I shouldn't say we. The right tends to take this position after these acts that there's nothing we can do. I tell you, Tommy, that during the campaign, I played Donald Trump for Kamala Harris in her debate prep. And what I found very interesting was that there's one thing that Donald Trump never talks about. And it's that after the Vegas shooting that I refer to, he passed or he set in motion a regulation to outlaw bump stocks.
Right.
He never talks about that. He never talks about that. And why? It's because there's such a political pressure to not in any way impede gun ownership.
Well, some
That
people would
even
say,
when
you say impede, some people would say infringe. But in this case of this Wisconsin shooting, again, we're learning more each and every minute. We're getting more information. It's going to be an investigation. If there's a manifesto, I hope it's released. We're still waiting for the transgender shooters manifesto here in Nashville, which has not been released to us. Thank goodness Kash Patel is going to soon be, in my hope, leading the FBI, and we're going to get a little bit more transparency.
don't get me started on that.
Well, we're going to get into all of that because I've got a lot more to talk to you about. But if this
Good.
15-year-old did in fact use a handgun, unless you're going to start confiscating handguns from law-abiding citizens, you weren't going to stop this. Yes, there needs to be more parental responsibility. I agree 1,000%. There needs to be a lot more responsibility in general in the United States of America. But at some point, taking away the rights of law-abiding citizens because you've got one cuckoo crazy person who probably has mental health issues, maybe has parents that weren't responsible with a firearm, you're not going to impede on the rights of law-abiding gun owners, especially handgun owners, because of this incident. That's where I would draw the line, because my rights don't end where somebody's horrible actions begin.
But you, I mean, without having a constitutional debate, you don't believe that you have the right to own a bazooka.
No, but this is the same argument that Joe Biden tries to use. We're not owning bazookas. Again, calling for an assault weapons ban after a handgun shooting is also stupid because a handgun...
Well, no, that's not, I wasn't calling for that. I'm saying that.
No, but Joe Biden was. Joe Biden
years,
and Kamala Harris were. I mean, it was immediately after it was the assault weapons ban. It's like that wouldn't have done anything to prevent this.
Well, why isn't there an assault weapons ban?
Why isn't there an assault weapons ban? Because who are you to tell me what kind of firearm I can own?
But I'm telling you, you can't have a bazooka, and you've acknowledged that you can't have a bazooka.
Bazooka is not a firearm.
I
don't want a cannon either.
You can't have a 50 caliber car-mounted weapon.
Correct, but I can have an AR-15. So that's
right. But I'm saying there are lines. This is not an absolute.
Sure, and there are lines, bazookas and cannons, and vehicle-mounted heavy artillery. That is certainly the line, but an AR-15 is not the line. And if Democrats want to go down this path, I mean, go for it. You guys really are not in the position to start calling for gun control. I don't think the American appetite is there. And I would also assert that maybe we need to control our borders and the unvetted, undocumented people streaming through them if we want to start talking about cracking down on criminals and crime and thugs and those kind of things.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time, but something didn't work here. I mean, do you believe that plastic guns should be legal? Because to go back to where we started, we're talking about why aren't there metal detectors in schools, which again, I think, unfortunately, is a practical solution to this. Right. But if you were to say plastic guns are okay, then how do you deal with that? Because then you've got kids or whoever, bad guys walking in right through metal detectors with plastic weapons. So, I mean, it cannot be an absolute that any firearm can be okay. There has to be some kind of common sense imprint on, like, I own a legal weapon, Right,
but you wouldn't go shoot up a school.
Right, but I understand if someone tells me I can't own a plastic gun because that wouldn't be detected at a TSA checkpoint in the airport.
Right.
I understand that intellectually.
Here's the whole premise, though, and I do have to move on because I got a lot more to talk to you about, so I have to get beyond this. But my perspective is this. Somebody who is mentally deranged is going to go shoot up a school, and especially if they're 15 years old, there's nothing legal about any part of this narrative whatsoever. So the fact that there would be more laws and more infringements on legal gun owners like yourself and like myself that would solve some kind of a tragedy where a person who is likely mentally unstable would go shoot up students at a school, that's where the disconnect is. I do want to move on, though, because I have a lot of questions for you. We could debate guns all day long, I am sure. But, speaking in that same vein about maybe forgiving criminalization on one hand and not the other, and maybe some of the disjointed arguments coming from the left, I've got to get your take on Joe Biden's legacy and his pardons and his commutations, because there are some in your own party, including Senator Amy Klobuchar, which is the clip I want to play for you, who are a little concerned that Joe, whoever's controlling Joe, might be kind of running roughshod over this process. Let's take a look at this clip.
This past week, he had this record number of commutations, 1,500 Americans, more than any president in any single day. Among them, though, there was a judge involved in a so-called cash for kids scheme that sent thousands of kids to jail for millions of dollars. A man who committed tax fraud at a cost of more than $1.6 billion, described as the most prolific, pernicious, utterly unrepented tax cheat in U.S. history. A woman who was involved in a $26 million scheme to defraud Medicare. Are you comfortable with some of these decisions?
No. There's also a man in Duluth that was running a major drug house, basically, and had all this money under his bathroom tiles, was also commuted. So the way I look at this is I also didn't agree with the pardon of the president's son.
All right, so is Joe's legacy, is it getting a little murky? You know, I would say it couldn't get much worse, but you think Democrats are starting to get a little bit concerned about some of the things that Joe's doing in his final lap here?
I mean, obviously in DC, yes. I think pardons, if you look at, for at least as long as I can remember presidents and pardoning, it never goes well. I think it's a very inside baseball game. And let me set aside for a moment whether I agree or disagree, because I will answer that. And I actually very much agree with Senator Klobuchar, except for the Hunter Biden part, which you'll love. But I do think a year from now, if you say to someone, who did he pardon and why, the only thing they're going to remember is Hunter Biden. They're not going to remember these 1,500. The examples that were just shown on screen seemed like people that should rot in jail if that's where they were. I'm not particularly forgiving in these kind of things. For me, a pardon, I don't know what the intent was in the Constitution, but to me, a pardon seems to be something that should be for a gross miscarriage of justice or some other extreme case. In the case of Hunter, look, as a father, I understand why he did it. I don't think he lied. I think he, in his head, believed that he wouldn't do it. I think this is a guy, remember, who didn't want to drop out of the race because he thought he would win. Now, whether you think that that's delusional or not, if you do have that mindset, you don't think pardoning is going to be necessary. You think you're going to be president, or you think Kamala is going to be president, and you don't have to worry about the Kash Patels of the world. So I do think after the election, we lost. And right out of the gate, last time you and I spoke was about Matt Gaetz. Right out of the gate, you have Matt Gaetz being named. I think he got, I think
Philippe,
it became
I
real.
have to stop you there because I'm confused. I have a question for you. If you say, Joe didn't think he would pardon Hunter because Joe thought that he or Kamala were going to win, then doesn't that still throw out your argument that he wasn't going to pardon Joe or he wasn't going to pardon Hunter on principle? Because if it was just on principle I believe in the law, then it shouldn't matter who was the president.
I agree, but it's his son. And I think at the end of the day, if there was any crime here, for lack of a better word, it wasn't that he lied. It's that he was probably naive, and that he thought, this is a guy who served in the Senate, who has served in the United States government for his entire adult life. Some people might think too many years, but for 50 years, his job has been the rule of law. I don't think he could come to grips with the idea of just pardoning his son because it was his son.
Well, and he came around to it pretty quick.
Well, because it got real pretty quick. I mean, you got to a place where you have to remember, for those of us who know the minutia of the Hunter Biden saga, it's not the gun charge and the tax evasion that the Republicans, particularly in the House, have gone after him for. It has been the infamous laptop and Burisma, the payments.
We've got questions. And do you think it's a little odd then if Joe was just trying to talk about his son's obviously addiction issues? Do you think that there's a reason why it went all the way back to 2014? Was Joe trying to save himself from some investigations here?
No. I think that's just, you don't want to leave. If someone's going after your child for political reasons.
So he didn't do what he did? You just talked to me about gun control, and you've got Hunter Biden throwing a firearm in a dumpster by a school, and you're going to tell me that that's not a problem?
Well, technically, his wife threw it in the dumpster, which I'm only saying because I don't know who the hell thinks it's a good idea to throw a gun in a dumpster at a Whole Foods or whatever grocery chain. No, I don't think that that's not a big deal. I do think it's a big deal. But that's not the political calculus here. What the House Republicans have been going after him for have been something else. So when you're asking about why is such a long stretch, I think it's really to just deny anything. And look, while we're talking about this, just yesterday, the FBI witness / informant who claimed that they had information that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden took bribes admitted to lying. There is a very nefarious undercurrent here of going after the president's child. Look,
oh boy. Oh, Philippe, I know you're not going to talk to me about the weaponization of the judicial system. And I know you're not going to cry to me that it's been unfavorable to Democrats. I know you're not going to try to levy that given everything they did to Donald J. Trump. I know you're not going to try to say it's the other way around.
No, I'm going to say it about kids. There just has to be some kind of line. If you use the standard that would this have happened to someone else, the answer is no. This is actually, ironically, the identical argument, the identical argument that Donald Trump made in his New York case, which I happen to think, as much as it pains me, he's right about. If his name had not been Donald Trump, New York State would not have gone after that crime. It was a crime, and he was guilty of it. But so is jaywalking. I do it 10 times a day, and no one's arresting me. That same standard applied to Hunter Biden would also have not have left him to be arrested and charged with this, let alone a special counsel of the U.S. federal government. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we're really going to say if someone is being highlighted or gone after specifically because of who they are, if it shouldn't happen to Donald Trump, it shouldn't happen to Hunter Biden.
Okay.
Now,
well, I'm
in
just gonna
terms
go,
of larger things,
Philippe, I'm just going to go with you on your premise. I'm not going to argue with you that we're not going to agree on if it was politicized or not. But why lie about it? You know, why not just?
See, that's the thing. I don't think he lied. I think he was naive, and I think he should have said, "Look, we've been in these situations in our jobs where it's not." People think, look.
So it wasn't just to help win the election for Kamala because it would have looked bad? You don't think it had anything to do with the fact that he at the time was campaigning or was campaigning on behalf of Kamala?
But I think it's very disingenuous for Democrats in particular to say he should have been honest about this 6 months ago. Because you know what happened 6 months ago? Exactly what you said. Democrats have been like, oh my God, what is he doing? He's making it impossible for me to win my reelection. Why is he introducing pardoning Hunter Biden into this? So you've got a couple of steps here. One, I honestly think he thought his son didn't need it. Two, he didn't think it would be necessary. And three, you can't just say, I'm thinking about it, because the world would collapse in. It is so
so you're kind of proving my point here that the motivation to keep it under wraps until it didn't matter anymore was political. But I have to, Philippe, I got to move on because I have so many things I want to talk to you about. And the next thing I want to talk to you about is, well, let me pick here. I've got a list. Let's go after this. Let's do, speaking of Democrats, y'all loved RFK Jr. until you didn't love him anymore on the Democrat side. You loved him when he was crusading for the environment and climate change. But now that he wants to maybe reform our food system, make things a little bit healthier, maybe have some discussions about vaccine schedules, now Democrats are really anti-RFK. But I want to play you a clip because, of course, when Donald Trump did his presser yesterday, answering more questions than Joe Biden has in the last 4 years, he was asked about RFK. He was asked about vaccines. And this was his answer, which I thought was very actually diplomatic for Donald Trump. Let's take a look.
Two quick questions. First, on vaccines, do you want RFK Jr. to revoke any vaccines?
No, I want him to come back with a report as to what he thinks. We're going to find out a lot. We're doing two things. We're going to have tremendous cost savings that will come out of this. That's a minimum. And we're also going to have, and I think, very serious discussions about certain things, whether it's pesticides. Europe doesn't use pesticides, and yet they have a better mortality rate than we do. They don't use pesticides. In fact, they use it as an excuse not to take our farm product. We spend billions and billions of dollars on pesticides, and something bad's happening. Again, you take a look at autism today versus 20, 25 years ago, it's like not even believable.
Do you think it's worth having the discussion, seeing the reports, maybe seeing some research?
When you said the word discussion, I wanted to put an asterisk there. That's not what RFK Jr. wants. And by the way, I've never loved him. I met him a long time ago in New York, and I met him with he's a falconer, so he like came in with one of those leather gloves and the falcon standing on his arm. I just thought he was an odd duck more than anything. On the vaccine front, this is an unfortunate debate we've been having the last few years. And look, there are lots of parts. I didn't want Donald Trump to win in 2016 or in 2024. There are lots of parts of Donald Trump's positions I don't like. There's a lot of parts of Donald Trump I don't like. This is an example of something I think is really unfortunate, is this adoption of an issue like vaccine as this cutting edge issue. Now, let's be honest here. Donald Trump takes credit, as he should, for an incredibly quick creation of the the COVID vaccine under Operation Warp Speed. Okay. You'd never know it because the political base of the far right of the Republican Party is anti-vaccine. This is not a discussion.
I got to stop you, Philippe. I got to stop you because I fall into that far right category. I am not anti-vaccine. I am anti-COVID vaccine, specifically COVID vaccine mandates. That is what I am against, will always be against. And everything we've learned about the vaccine, you don't think that the American people have a right to be skeptical about a vaccine that they ramrodded through the process quickly.
I was skeptical.
Yeah, me too. I still am. Would never take it. You'd have to strap me down and inject me with that vaccine. I would never do it. But you don't think that the American people have a right to be skeptical because of all the BS that was fed to us during the pandemic? First of all, it was vaccines, they're going to prevent infection and spread. Lie. Vaccines don't cause any vax injuries. Lie. It has no effect on heart conditions, particularly in young men. Lie. Don't you think we have a right to be questioning something that the government wanted to mandate we put into our bodies as a condition of employment, travel, education?
You absolutely do. And I would love it if you were the Secretary of Health and Human Services having that discussion and going through those issues, because again, they were legit. It was a difficult time. It was awfully fast. I myself had questions about the trials, but look, it made a difference. But to your actual question, RFK Jr. does not want to have a conversation. He wants to turn off vaccines. That is a very different thing.
He has said blatantly.
He said he doesn't believe in these things.
He can have his own personal beliefs, but when asked if he wants to ban or outlaw vaccines, he said no. He's been asked about it. He wants to have reports. He wants to have studies, but he has been asked very, very clearly if he wants to ban vaccines, polio vaccine, other vaccines, and he said no. He wants to have a discussion. He wants to have reports. He wants findings. Since when is the left against science and scientific research? I thought that's what y'all loved so much, science.
That is rich. That is rich, because you can't say you have total disregard or just really don't believe or have legitimate concerns about the vaccine and then say that the left is the one that has a problem with science. That is crazy town.
The science, like the COVID science? Are you going to defend the COVID science?
There's plenty of
science. Dr. Fauci and his science.
But hold on a second. You don't like the science because it goes against what you believe.
There is no science that's ever evolving that they got wrong, so wrong. Should we have locked down businesses? Should we have kept kids out of school? Should we have mandated a COVID vaccine? 6 boosters, 7 boosters? Which science do you want to debate with me?
Hold on. Not everything was done for COVID was perfect. It was a kind of weird situation. I mean, I went back and read a lot about when this happened to the great influenza, which we call the Spanish flu, even though it started in the Western United States. This took a lot of time to get right and wrong. Last night I was with a friend and we were watching TV, and I don't know why I thought of it, but I remembered I was watching Contagion was on TV last night. And someone was saying they were nervous about it because it could have been on their boxes. And I remembered how at the very beginning of COVID, we were told not to touch our UPS deliveries, that they should sit for like a few days. And of course, that was ridiculous. And, for months and months and more, I walk all over DC, all over Virginia and Maryland. Why the hell was I wearing a mask outside? The thing wasn't going to get me. But you know what? I understand the notion of going a little overboard while we don't know. And if things went too far, I understand why there's frustration to that.
But
But the
overboard, I mean, it
vaccine
literally ruined people's lives. The lockdowns, the shutdowns, it ruined people's life. We're going to have generational learning loss. There's people who died alone in nursing homes because their loved ones weren't allowed to see them. People that miss milestones in their lives. People's businesses who will never rebound. Inflation that it caused in our economy because of all the COVID checks that came in the mailbox. I mean, there's a lot of ramifications that beyond just like maybe we went a little overboard.
Well, sure. And when we look back with total hindsight, there'll be a lot of things that should have been done differently. But one of them is not to have developed the vaccine. One of them is not to have never shut down any businesses, whether it's a restaurant or a corporation, or to not close any schools. Now, if you want to have the debate about how long those went on, that is incredibly legitimate. But to say that those things never should have been closed, because that is saying that you're disagreeing with science is crazy, because the science is what led to us to realize that people were spending too much time in close proximity. If you wanted to go to a restaurant in Nashville from the very beginning of COVID, and there's someone, or you owned a restaurant, you wanted to keep it open, okay, I guess someone should have let you do that. I'm not crazy, though, for not wanting to go to a restaurant.
Yeah, but that's all about that. But Philippe, that's about personal choices. We didn't have the personal choice. It was just, hey, I've often said, if you're scared, stay home. And you know what? People who are still scared should still stay home. I can't have the COVID debate all day long.
This is like guns. There's a balance. We don't let kids go to school without measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines. And by the way, that is something that RFK believes. Now, whether he's going to impose it, which he just can't do by snap of his fingers, or have a sober conversation. Look, we know if you left it to the guy that he would outlaw these things.
But you're not just going to leave it to the guy. He's not one time said, I'm going to go in and just ban all these vaccines. The fact that you would say that that's even possible.
Thankfully, he can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thankfully he
can't. He can't.
Look, this comes back to Donald Trump. He's the boss. That's why I think it's funny.
Exactly. And Donald Trump doesn't want to outlaw vaccines either. And in that presser yesterday, he said that he sat with the CEOs of Pfizer and all these companies and had an honest discussion and dialogue, which I don't know why some on the left are so against. Okay, I do have to.
But do you realize that Donald Trump is the one that shut down the government, shut down the society?
And you know what? And guess what? First of all, he didn't shut down anything. It was the states that shut things down. However, I will say this. I was one of the top critics that I said that Donald Trump shouldn't have given so much power to Fauci. And I think, could he do it over? He would have. However, I remember very distinctly Donald Trump wanting everything to reopen by Easter of that year. And everybody panicked and freaked out. Oh, you can't do this. There was such an outcry of, oh, no, we must stay home.
So he's Donald Trump. He's the president of the United States. He could have undone what he wanted to undo.
You're saying two things at once, Philippe. You're saying he should have, but you're also saying you wanted to wear a mask in D.C. outside. So you can't say both things at once.
Here's what I'm saying. Let's just take one example that drove people crazy, was masks on airplanes. That was single-handedly the president of the United States had the authority to undo that. Now, he can't make a North Dakota or a Connecticut school open against the wishes of the governors of the state. But yes, President of the United States can tell the FAA to cut the crap and make people not have to wear masks on airplanes. Why didn't he do that?
Well, if you recall, a lot of the mask mandates happened after Donald Trump was already out of office, and Joe Biden fought tooth and nail to keep.
I was wearing a mask.
And it was a judge, actually. It was a judge that actually reversed the forced masking on the airplanes, and liberals freaked out. And I still see liberals, not conservative, wearing masks to this very day, Philippe. Philippe, I have to go because I don't have, unfortunately, unlimited time. I had so much more to ask you, but I really hope that you'll come back.
We didn't talk about the wall, about selling off
Oh
pieces
God,
of the
I know. I wanted to talk to you about January 6th. I wanted to talk about the wall, but I'll have to have you back. There's much more to discuss, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Have me back the day after the 1,500 commutations of sentences and pardons on January 21st.
Fantastic. I'd love to. I call it my Christmas. January 20th is going to be a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
And now
Merry
we can
Christmas
all say
to
Merry
you.
Christmas again.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Merry Christmas to you, Philippe. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. CNN is failing fake news, and this latest dramatic example is just icing on the cake. It's time for final thoughts. Y'all remember that stunning video of the Syrian prisoner being freed from his cell and led into the light by CNN's own Clarissa Ward? Well, in case you missed it, here it is again. Prepare to be moved or possibly shaken to your very core.
Clear if there is something under the blanket.
Oh, it moved. Is there someone there? I thought I saw it move. Is someone there? Or is it just a blanket? I don't know.
I think it's someone. Hello?
Okay, it's just moving.
Oh.
I'm a civilian, he says. I'm a civilian. He tells the fighter he's from the city of Homs and has been in the cell for 3 months.
Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
He clutches my arm tightly with both hands.
Okay.
Does
anyone have any water? My. Okay, it's water. It's water. Okay. Okay. Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Wow, what a moment, and how miraculous fake news CNN so happened to be there to capture it. The journalism, the art, the performance, the terror? Yeah, in retrospect, that awe-inspiring tale of freedom and redemption was perhaps a bit less beautiful, considering that prisoner CNN helped free from the throes of oppression, terror, and torture was actually, wait for it, a friggin' alleged war criminal. This was brought to light by independent fact-checkers from Verify Sci, who published an entire report on this last weekend. Yes, CNN has really cemented itself as the standard bearer of fake news with this one, given that that prisoner they so nobly freed has since been identified as Salam Mohammed Salam, a first lieutenant in the Syrian Air Force with a long history of war crimes. So apparently this majestic oopsie happened because Salama gave him a fake name, Abdel Garabal, and claimed to be a prisoner of the Assad regime for 3 months. He told CNN he didn't know the regime had collapsed and had not seen sunlight for 3 months while in captivity. But according to fact-checkers and local residents, Salama is known as Abdul Hamza and has worked at security checkpoints in the region and was known to be involved in theft, extortion, coercing residents into becoming informants for Assad. Verify Sci also notes accounts of the man killing civilians during the Syrian civil war in 2014 and may have even been part of detaining and torturing young men on bogus charges, some for allegedly refusing to pay bribes. Locals also said he was in that prison for less than a month, and it was actually not for some noble cause, but rather over a dispute with a high-ranking officer over sharing extorted money. Now, for their part in this theatrical liberation, CNN has denied it was fabricated or set up, and has also acknowledged subsequent reports that the man they helped free is not who they thought he was, and they intend to make this into a broader story. Sure. CNN's Clarissa Ward counted this experience as one of the most extraordinary she's ever witnessed, and albeit for very different reasons, Clarissa, we agree. What a moment. And those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation at your leisure. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. And you still have time to grab that last-minute gift. Shop all Outkick merchandise by visiting shop.outkick.com and score 20% off with code HOLIDAY at checkout. From Nashville, God bless and take care.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.